Is my voice audible to all? Is my voice audible to all? Hello, is my voice audible to all? Kelvin, Sanobar, Abdul? Okay. Okay. So our today's class is on strategic management, and in today's class I have chosen the topic IT strategic management, that how strategies are being framed in perspective to IT. So we will be seeing the IT strategic management part, whether it's IT procurement, whether you purchase softwares, whether you purchase software licenses, whether you purchase the IT hardware, how IT is linked with business, every aspect you will be seeing in this IT strategic management part. So I don't think there is any other class going on apart from this one, because I am seeing only 3 attendees in the class right now. Is there any other class going on apart from this one? Okay, then let's begin the class. IT strategic management. I have a video for you, and it's a very good video in which you will be seeing a lot of things in perspective to IT strategic management.
The class is starting at 11, not 1 o'clock, which I think a lot of people are still confused about. Okay, let's get started. The class is starting at 11, not 1 o'clock, which I think a lot of people are still confused about. But I'm sure we'll get everything in order as time progresses. This is lecture 2 for this particular class, although it really is lecture 1 in terms of the class content. Last week, if you missed it, talk to me after class. I think all of you were actually here, from the people I can recognize. And I just went over an overview of the syllabus, overview of the assignments, overview of the class. So today is actually the real first lecture of the course. And it is the PowerPoint slide set lecture 2, competing with information technology, why study strategic management of information technology, the name of the course. So this is really an overview of a lot of the topics, and you can kind of think of it as the outline in some different ways. But talking about the strategic advantage that information technology can add to almost any business. And as I mentioned last week, we don't have a textbook for the course. Instead, what I've done is I've pulled lectures and I've pulled information from a variety of different sources. One of them being what you're looking at here on this slide. This particular lecture is based on a book by James O'Brien and George Morakis, if I've said that correctly. And the book's titled Management Information Systems. And I put the ISBN number up here just in case you're interested. And what I'm doing is essentially giving you a lot of information from a lot of different sources, putting it all together. There really is no one, in my opinion, there really is no one good source for strategic management of information technology. You can't talk about information technology without talking about information systems. You can't, and vice versa. So it's kind of like I almost have to pull from a lot of different sources to make this actually worthwhile. There's a URL down in the bottom where you can actually see some of the authors' PowerPoints as well for his particular text. This is not the full chapter 2, Competing with Technology. This is bits and pieces of it that kind of work with the strategic management stuff. You're cutting edge, I should say. Now, if you don't do it, you're behind the times. It's almost automatically assumed if you're going to run a business in the U.S. that you're going to use technology to help that business. If you don't, you're not going to be able to run the business. So the old traditional mom and pop shop, like opening up the little for sale sign, throwing the blanket out on the ground with your products out there. And you still see them, when you go to shows, trade shows, or you go to fairs, like downtown festivals and things. You see like the jewelry and the handcrafts and stuff. But really, does someone really make their, well, I guess people do really make their living that way. But if you're going to try and make a lot of money and actually try to support a family on it, that doesn't work. So neither does opening up a store and relying upon walk-in sales. That doesn't work either. So nowadays, in order to even, make the cost of living here in the United States, it's going to definitely be a challenge. So anyway, what ends up happening to most businesses is they have to actually kind of think outside the box a little bit and start, understanding how to use technology to make that business successful, to give yourself the best chances of success. So we'll also look at several strategies using internet technologies. When I talk about IT, for most businesses, the internet is the main component. In fact, for most everything we're doing these days, the internet plays a huge part. So we have to basically know how to use it and take advantage of what it has to offer, and give you some advantages and maybe also some disadvantages. So, take a look at a lot of different types of things, and also look at some examples of how businesses have been able to re-engineer themselves. Take a look at how the business tasks can be improved. And this is kind of builds on, if you've taken my MIS course, Management Information Systems, then talk a lot about business processes, business process re-engineering, and using information systems to kind of help support the work effort. In this particular class, we're going to focus more on the technology aspect of it. But it is a huge part of doing business. I mean, people go to work every day, they have jobs that they're doing, they have work assigned to them, tasks that they're performing. You have to use technology these days. If you rely on old manual labor, again, it's just kind of like throwing out a blanket and put some jewelry on it. You're not going to be able to compete, especially with people on eBay who are selling them, every second. They got 10 sales coming through. So anyway, re-engineering is another topic. Identifying the business value of using the internet and internet technologies as well. And then also looking at identifying how to become agile in terms of an agile competitor, and how to form a virtual company, and how to use technology to give you a company image. In fact, that brings up a really good point. Talking about throwing out a blanket and putting some jewelry on it. That was done maybe 10, 20, 30 years ago. Still being done today. But now people just, purchase some web space for $9.95 a year, throw up a website. There you go, you're in business. It's kind of the equivalent, but it's kind of also, shows you a sign of the times. With technology, we're doing the same thing. It's the same concept. So business is business. And then, as technology grows, it's like you have to adapt. Otherwise, you can't. You can't survive. In fact, in the old days, if you had a website, when the internet was first kind of becoming well used and kind of the public focus, people thought you didn't exist. Oh, you're on the internet? Oh, and that's not real. That's a hoax. That those guys are, they're fake. Now it's the opposite. Now, if you're not on the internet and they can't find you on the internet, that's a hoax. You guys you don't exist. Even if you've been in a building for 20 years and you don't have a website, you missed the boat. Actually, is what happened to you. You're off the wagon, I guess. I don't know. All right, also explaining how knowledge management systems can help businesses gain strategic advantages as well. And if you were in my MIS class, I talked a lot about knowledge management, knowledge engineering. This is kind of an extension of that, and how to use technology to develop knowledge and actually to grow the information concept. Because we know information is information that's built from data plus data. Data plus more data gives us information. Information plus more information gives us knowledge. Knowledge plus more knowledge gives us wisdom. I don't think we can get any higher than wisdom. I don't know. I haven't gotten any higher than wisdom myself, so I don't know. All right, so why study strategic IT? The question of today, which is really kind of the lecture one material, essentially, that I gave you last week. So just to review, technology is no longer an afterthought in forming a business strategy. It's actually the cause and the driver of the business. If you think about so many businesses that have come into existence, and it's probably not a bad idea to start talking about what the difference is between a business and what's referred to as an e-business. Because you've got a few choices when you open a business. For the entrepreneurial people, you can open up, a traditional style business. Or you can go the e-business route, which is actually kind of different. The old, long time ago, a real kind of beginning definition of it had it tied with e-commerce. And say, well, an e-business, they do e-commerce. If you think about it, then every business is an e-business. After what I just said about having to be on the internet, otherwise you don't exist, using technology. Well, then that requires everybody to be an e-business, but not everybody is an e-business. So if you want to talk about e-businesses, it's not a bad side note, not on the slide set, but just kind of as a FYI. My personal definition of that is it's a business that doesn't exist in the real world. And as an example of that, let's take the comparison between Amazon. We all know about Amazon. If you're a student, you buy books, Amazon, and then Barnes & Noble. Barnes & Noble is a traditional business. In fact, if you go to any Barnes & Noble, there's stores. You can walk in. And people actually still buy books at the stores. In fact, it's a great place. They have free internet access now. Well, Starbucks has got free internet access. You usually see Barnes & Noble's kind of mixed in with the Noah's Bagels and the Starbucks, usually on the same center, maybe sometimes under the same roof. You walk in, you spend a couple hours. If you're a nerdy type, that's entertainment for you. You find some books, you sit there, you study, do stuff like that. You can't do that with Amazon. Amazon doesn't have a real store that you can walk into. In fact, Amazon has warehouses where they actually stock stuff that comes from publishers. Barnes & Noble actually doesn't have any warehouses. They have stores, and they drop ship everything. So when you buy something from a Barnes & Noble, it generally comes directly from a publisher to a customer through like this wall called Barnes & Noble, and that handles the transaction using e-commerce, as the buzzword for it. Amazon, similar. However, they actually have warehouses full of stuff, and they have a couple of different components. As an example, everyone's aware, you can buy used books at Amazon. Actually, you can buy more than just books at Amazon. You can buy stereo equipment. You can buy everything, practically. It's almost like a little eBay, if you think about it. They have their own little consumer-to-consumer portal aspect of it as well, and they have actually branched out into a couple of other areas as well. But long story short, you can't walk into an Amazon store and buy somebody's used stereo equipment. Not only is it not there, but it's just impossible because it's all electronic. The business itself runs on an e-business platform or e-business model, completely electronic. Barnes & Noble, no, that's a traditional business. They actually have stores. So if you break it down to just, ask yourself the question, if the internet were to go down, would the company exist? If the company's not going to exist without the internet, and that has heavy reliance, then they're an e-business. If they would still exist, they would still function just fine, then they're a real business. They're a traditional style business. And then I was like, when I explained this, and I was like, well, what about eBay? eBay's an e-business. PayPal, owned by eBay. E-business. So Macy's, real business. Real traditional, not e-business. But they all sell stuff online. Department store, everybody sells stuff online. So they participate in e-commerce anyway. So I think I have killed that one as much as possible. Beaten that one down. But it's still at the end, sometimes on a midterm I say, give me an example of an e-business. Give me an example of a real business. And students say, it's like, they don't know the difference for some reason. But that's actually kind of a typical question I like to just throw out there to see if anyone's been listening to me all term. But yeah. So how IT can also, IT can change the way businesses compete because we're focusing on the strategic advantage that IT provides. When you talk about strategic advantage, you've got to break it out into a couple different categories. The first and utmost importance is revenue, I would hope. If you can't think of that and it doesn't make any sense to you, then you shouldn't be an MBA student because the world revolves around money, sorry to say. So, revenue. And how are you going to get revenue? You're going to compete. So, you're either going to implement IT to give yourself a competitive advantage. You're going to implement it maybe to make yourself more effective. Because if it's not revenue you're focused on, then it's cost savings. So why are we spending so much money for customer service people? Why do we have a warehouse this big? Your fixed assets, your operating expenses are too high. You can use information technology to lower those expenses. Another way that you can strategically implement information technology would also be to introduce a new product or service to your existing business. A classic example of that is what Federal Express did. And that's actually, I'm jumping ahead, so what I'm saying now, when we get to it, I don't have to cover it. I've already covered it. But I like to talk ahead because it makes more sense to put it all together in the beginning. But anyway, long story short, so Federal Express, actually all of the shipping companies today, you can't run a shipping company without having online tracking and online services. So you can print, log into their website. In fact, even the U.S. Postal Service does this now. Print labels out, do your own print and ship kind of thing. In fact, it makes it easier for the consumer, faster, more convenient, cheaper, because you're not using Federal Express or even United States Postal Service employees. You're doing your own effort. You're printing your own label. You're using your own paper. In fact, most of the time you're using your own boxes too. And so there's no labor, and you can actually process a lot more of those transactions. Yes?
Is there any disadvantages of
Disadvantages? In that example I just gave you, there's a huge one. There's no one checking you to see if you've done it correctly. In fact, I can't tell you how many times I've printed out the wrong label. I've printed out something for a large size box when I'm putting it on a small one. So I'm paying more, from a consumer's perspective. To jump way far ahead, in a totally separate lecture that's going to happen a couple weeks down the road, I can tell you one big, huge advantage of using technology is whatever you invent, your competitor is going to copy you and probably do it better. Because you're going to make the initial investment, spend all the money, and do all the research. They're going to take a look at that and go, oh, I can do that. After you've already figured it out, they're going to copy you. Because the one problem with technology is it's highly exposed. You can't hide what you're doing, for the most part. I mean, you can copyright and you have your own intellectual property in terms of your technology, but it's really easy to tell that you're using some sort of an electronic signature, or you're using some sort of a service, or you're using... So yeah, one of the biggest disadvantages for companies, and I would say it's the first one on the block to do it. But that happens in the real world anyway, in the traditional business world. The guy who comes out with the product first isn't the guy that makes the most money. It's the second and thirds that come out that do a better job. And actually, it's kind of like, I hate to go back to an Apple example, but it's kind of like that iPod. They weren't the first MP3 players on the market. But they actually are pretty much the leaders right now. So, even set-top boxes, all your new, your cell phone, everything had people that came up with these ideas that, brought it to the market, but they're not the ones that made the most money on it because somebody stole their idea. And you know what? I shouldn't say steal their idea either. It's a free market economy. They are taking advantage of something that someone's already, had sweated over to build and to discover and to figure out. But if you think about it, that's how the economy grows. We wouldn't have all the really good products that we have right now if people didn't take advantage of what somebody else learned, somebody else did. So, but that's actually a theme for a lecture I'm going to have in about 3 or 4 weeks. After I tell you all the good stuff about and all the strategic advantages, then I'm going to hit the disadvantages and all the problems that this poses and comes into. And I'll talk about the legal system at that point as well. So, oops. All right, unless there are any other questions, back to and hopefully I answered that question, who knows. But anyway, I think I probably did. I don't know. All right, so IT can also change the way businesses compete. The strategic view of information systems. One thing that the internet brought to us was information upon information upon information. And actually, I don't know if I actually even finished my example about FedEx and the shipping, but just as a side note to go back to finish that example, it has what FedEx did actually revolutionized package handling all over the world. And they basically introduced a new service, a new product. So they used information technology to give themselves something they didn't have, which is more levels of service, different qualities, different delivery times. Now we have morning, mid-morning, late afternoon, evening. I don't know exactly how many different times of day we can schedule something to arrive. But if they can track it, then they can guarantee it. And if they can actually manage their business better, then they can offer those products and services and stuff like that, which is kind of like what PayPal did for eBay and then eventually became part of eBay. You know, people are afraid to use credit cards online. So PayPal exists solely to give people peace of mind when they do an electronic transaction. And if you integrate it into an e-commerce engine, you know, the eBay, then you got the best of both worlds because you got buying and then you've got paying for it and you've got shipping it. Also, there's shipping modules that are integrated into it. You have everything all housed in one safe, well, presumably safe environment for people to work in. And I'll go through an entire list of other strategic advantages that information technology provides businesses from all sorts of different characteristics, or all sorts of different reasons. So there's many different ways of thinking about it. All right, so information. So the big information superhighway, the WWW, World Wide Web, the Internet as we know it, means organizational renewal sometimes, being able to take something and add new meaning to it. In my information systems class, I start out by talking about how, and I just went through the formulas for you, data plus data and information. Anyway, long story short, you collect it. You collect it for a while, you put it into a database, which is why database systems are so popular for businesses these days. And then once you have the database, then it's like, well, what do we do with it now? You come up with new products and services that are based on the data. You could use the data or that information to figure out, you know, last year around Christmas time, we built 100 of these items, and we sold all of them within the first day. And then the year before that, we had 500 of them, and we had 200 of them left over. Okay, that means we need to, 300 of them or 400 of them. So you can actually use the data that's collected to give you statistics, which is how all the statistical packages come into play in a lot of business communities, so that you can figure out how to run your business better. You know, what order quantities should you make? What kind of shipping? What quality of service are you providing? How many of your customers are coming back and buying multiple products if you're keeping track of customer information? How many of those customers call in for support? How long do they wait? Car companies have been doing this for years, and they actually have you tracked to the point where they know how many miles you've got on your car sometimes. Especially as an example, well, not to advertise, but the whole thing with BMW, 2 years of free scheduled maintenance. And then they keep track of you, and they give you, well, you paid for it ahead of time when you bought the car. But every time you come in, you look at the newer models. They have you're housed with correct information in their database. They can send you flyers, promos, information about your scheduled service. You're going to the dealership whether you like it or not, because you're getting free service that you've already paid for when you bought the car. But because they tack on a little bit extra for that free service, which really isn't that free. Because what ends up happening is I've done some studies on it, and I've determined that a good percentage of those free service appointments turn into sales. Cross-sale, up-sale, oh, you need seat covers, oh, you need this, oh, you need that, window tinting, all the, car detailing services. They sell you on almost everything. And people, will actually go for it. Well, it's not like an intrusive telephone solicitor calling you at dinner time while you're trying to enjoy your food to sell you a new cell phone plan. Instead, you're going to them. You're more apt to actually get a new car every 2 years when your service is over with. Oh, my service is over with. Yeah, the mechanic's telling you, oh yeah, you know what? You only got a couple more years left. Maybe you should trade it in or something, So it's a sales ploy. But the information that they're housing on you, what problems you've had with the car, stuff like, is helping them through a customer relationship management program, helping them mine you in terms of data mining or manage you, depending upon how you want to think about it. So information systems are necessary investments in technology. You can adopt strategies using information systems. Business processes can change. You can enable or re-engineer or reinvent yourself so you can survive in today's dynamic environment. And what do you mean by that? Well, if you're running a grocery store, you got to have point-of-sale systems that do some sort of infrared barcode scanning. If you're running a warehouse, you got to do inventory control somehow automated. You can't spend weeks, months. Actually, in the old days when you did physical count, it took like maybe sometimes the entire month of January if you're going to try and close your books out at the end of the month, end of the year. Now with all the barcode stuff, in fact, now they have infrareds on boxes and stuff. You go through the warehouse, you wave a wand down the aisle, and it tells you how many you've got of everything on that shelf. Which, to hire someone to go count those items, it's going to be way too time consuming. How many people can you check out at the grocery? How many people can be checked out within the hour? Basically, bottom line is how many sales can you make, and then can you give the option for people to buy it online? Stuff like that. So, reinventing yourself could be a matter of figuring out your business isn't doing well. What business actually stays profitable for its entire lifetime. Eventually, somebody else is going to open up next door and provide better customer service, or they're going to be faster, or they're going to have better looking products or something. So you can actually use information systems and technologies to give yourself a facelift as a business. And I don't mean putting up a brand new website, which is the common misperception. You see this all the time, actually. You see, you go to, oh wow, I went to the website a year ago, you go to now, and you look at the website, oh look, new color combination. Look, new pictures. That doesn't actually give the business a facelift. It makes them look better. That makes their website look better. Actually, sometimes it's the opposite. Sometimes, what is familiar to somebody is a bonus. And if you're already I hate it when you go into something, and if you've noticed, eBay hasn't changed. That format will stay the same for the next 20 years. Why? Because I know how to use it. I'm familiar with it, and I'm actually not even a big eBay customer. Or I go through my garage occasionally and get rid of junk on eBay. But I get one item a month maybe or something at the most. But when I go in, I remember what it looked like. I remember where everything is. I know how to check my messages and stuff. If you think you're giving your company a facelift by adding some new color, rearranging the whole design, hiring a web developer to come in to give your company a facelift, what you're doing is sabotaging everybody who used to know you and making it more difficult for them to do business with you. Because they go to your site, where is everything? Last time I was here, they're not going to bother. The time and effort that most consumers invest in learning your website is maybe 2 seconds. I think it was somebody wrote a book called the 5-second rule. Meaning if you can't find what you're looking for within 5 seconds, you close the website. Most consumers would hit the back button, go somewhere else. It's like the 5-second rule, which means it's got to be clear enough. And then there's the 3-click rule. If it takes you longer than 3 clicks to get to something, consumers won't bother. If you notice, most software is following the 3-click rule. It's always file, open, pick the file name, or file, save, put the file name in there, or it's always a series of 3s, because most people can remember 3. It's like remembering telephone numbers with 3 digits, 4 digits. Well, 4 is a challenge, but 3 works for most people. So anyway, there's rules and strategies, and if you follow the strategies, you have better luck than if you go and you put more pictures on the website, or more graphics. Or you decide, we need to use Dreamweaver, or we need to use Flash. Everybody's using Flash. We have to give ourselves a company facelift so that we can look better, look like everybody else. Well, that's the problem. You don't want to look like everybody else. It's kind of like if you were, and in fact, actually, I'm not ready to talk about that slide yet. If you were to think about what people's company behavior is in terms of how they update their websites, it totally contradicts traditional business philosophy. everybody wants to look like everybody else on the internet. I mean, in fact, well, some scammers make a living doing this, but impersonating other people. But the legitimate people, they're all trying to use, like, flash video here, drop-down menus. It's all copying everybody else and making you look, quote-unquote professional. And what ends up standing out are the unique people in a lot of different ways. So it's, I don't know. If all companies built the same products, that wouldn't make any sense either. So anyway, that's a long story. Anyway, so the book that I gave you the reference for in the beginning has a series of case studies. The slide set's going to go through not the whole case. In fact, I'm just going to talk about a little bit in terms of what came out of it. And at the end, and the slide set's about 60 slides long, but don't worry about it. Half of it's questions that you don't have to answer. But it's stuff you should think about in terms of trying to understand, why did something happen a certain way? Why is something a certain way? Which kind of makes you wonder sometimes, makes you think a little bit. And case number one kind of gets in the concept of, does technology really matter? And that one I actually kind of explained already in terms of, and the answer to that question is, yeah, the IT does matter. I mean, you can't compete without it these days. Nicholas Carr, I believe he's from GE. Yeah, he is. General Electric. Simple infrastructure of modern business. It goes through equivalent. If you take the IT and consider it an infrastructure, it's actually like the network, the telephone system, the applications, the programs, the communication, the correspondence between people, the automation of work. And if you think about it, it's kind of like an infrastructure that you get with the electrical systems, like for power, for railroads, for bus routes, for roads, for streets, for cars. And you think about it, without the infrastructure, life would be a lot harder. If you didn't have connectivity between all the different areas, if we didn't have airplanes, we couldn't fly to one city to another. So the information technology is kind of the equivalent, from his perspective, it's kind of the equivalent to that. So that's why, to answer the question, why it does matter. Because if you throw the blanket out and you put your jewelry on it and you put a little sign up that says $5, 2 for $10, or whatever you're doing, people in Arizona aren't going to see your sign, and they're not going to walk by you while you're sitting on the Saturday afternoon at the fair selling your stuff. They're not going to see you. And what are you going to get? You're going to get whoever happened to have shown up, who walked by, who actually looked at your sign or looked at your jewelry or something. So you're kind of giving yourself a huge disadvantage because you're working without an infrastructure, you're working without a network, which is why kind of like people always, and the funny thing is people always equate technology with the internet. There's a lot of technology that's not on the internet, actually. There's a lot of business technology that is private, that isn't a public internet kind of thing. And we'll talk a little bit more about that further on. We'll start looking at distinctions between different types of technologies. And so once innovation applications of IT have become simply the cost of doing business, and it actually is sort of the cost of doing business. If you're going to go into business today, you have to be prepared to spend on IT. If you don't want to spend on IT, I wouldn't go into business. And then that scares a lot of people, actually, because a lot of people, in fact, well, you can't escape it. If you're taking a business class these days, or business program, like an MBA program, you're going to take something in IT or IS. It's a given. Otherwise, the school would be doing you injustice at the end because, you're going to be afraid of it. In fact, a lot of the older managers, which is kind of good for young college grads, but the older people are afraid of technology. They don't have, well, this is about 10 years ago. I don't think we have any more older people holding CIO or CEO positions that aren't technology savvy. Everybody's technology savvy. But there was a time that we didn't have computers in our crib, and we grew up without technology, and we got our first exposure to computers way after school. Those people were technically challenged, and it took a while to get them away, or I shouldn't say get them away, to train them or have them leave so they can bring in some younger blood. So a lot of the startup companies unfortunately, are doing the exact opposite of what they should be doing. They're focusing more on the technology than they are on the business concept. So it really is just like it used to be. In order to have a good idea, to be an entrepreneur, you actually have to have a good business idea with a good business plan. And then technology is the cost of doing business. It's kind of the add-on to it. A lot of startups, in fact, a lot of the whole .com stuff that you guys probably heard about, hopefully, in Silicon Valley or out here in California, the opening and closing of businesses overnight. In fact, some of this stuff never even existed. Some of these businesses were like vaporware, vapor products, vapor programs. Long story short, it was all on technology, and business was like a secondary kind of thing. I was like, wow, we have this cool wireless device. Let's sell it. It's like, well, who wants it? What's it used for? Well, how can we implement it? Why do we want it? Kind of thing. And so there was no business sense to it. So it really is the other way around. And so how important is IT to General Electric, GE? Well, it's a business imperative. It's the lifeblood of productivity. Well, according to this guy, 20% of the return on the technology investments. And GE invests $2.5 to $3 billion a year. There was an old case I liked better than this, actually. It was Morgan Stanley underinvestment in information systems. And it talked about, there's no more Morgan Stanley anymore, but back before the financial market collapsed in the U.S., we actually had investment bankers, and we had a lot of them out there. We had the traditional style, and then we had the new ones that were using IT. This is right before, you guys remember E-Trade? Is E-Trade still around? I think it should be. Yeah. It wasn't like a scam or anything. It was really true. But here's what happened. It's like they got smart. Most of the investment bankers said, well, the internet, if people can use and sell items online and do commerce, why can't they do trading? Let's bring the stock exchange to the internet. So E-Trade, you buy and you sell stock for yourself. Unfortunately, the investment bankers, they have education in financial planning. They know how the stock market works. They know how to do investments wisely. So you're a 17, 18-year-old high school kid, or you're a college kid, or you're young, and you have, money that you're making from your income, and you're sticking it all in, and you're doing all these bad choices. Anyway, long story short, when you take all of just the technology applied towards stock exchange, buying and selling stocks and commodities and things, and doing investments, you take the technology, you put it into the hands of a technology-savvy person, it doesn't give them a financial advisor background. It doesn't teach them about finance. It teaches them how to click and press buttons to buy and sell. Anyway, long story short, a lot of people lost a lot of money, a lot of company, a lot of bad investments. That was kind of like the end of the .com boom, or bust, I should say, around here. But the reason why I brought that example up was companies like Morgan Stanley back when things were pretty bad in the economy. And what ends up happening is the first time anything ever goes bad in the economy, who gets laid off? The IS people. What do those information systems people do anyway? They just sit around and they spend money for the company. Because if you think about it, if you don't know anything about IS&T, information systems and technology, and you're trying to cut business expenses because you can't make your payroll, because your sales are down, because the economy sucks, who are you going to lay off? The people who aren't leading to the bottom line, usually. So a lot of people actually got rid of information systems, technology people. Who needs those technical guys working on the computers all day? And a company like Morgan Stanley did that. And in the meantime, their competitors kept them, didn't lay off the IT staff. And anyway, this was right in the beginning of the internet and e-trading. And then all these financial companies ended up with websites where customers could log in and manage their portfolio, see what their financial advisor was doing, make recommendations, maybe if they wanted to, trade themselves. Go ahead and take their stab at play around with buying and selling stuff. And a company that doesn't do this is going to fall behind. It's going to be, you can't be competitive. You're not providing that service anymore. You didn't provide it at all. And anyway, it makes the company not as competitive as everybody else out there. And so long story short, the company pretty much, it cost them a lot of money. They lost a lot of customers. Everybody moved to the new company, to the companies that were adding these services that offered this. Actually, credit card companies kind of did that for a while too. Banks started doing stuff like that. Like if you couldn't do e-banking, people would move. Now everybody does e-banking. Now every financial company will have something where you can log in online and look at your account, see how much money you're making, print some reports out, print out tax forms and stuff like that, which is basically what I would consider, an expected service. But a lot of these expected stuff never used to be. I mean, it was like somebody did it for a competitive advantage in the beginning. Hello. All right, so getting back to this case study, today's main risk is not underusing IT, but overspending on it. Which actually brings up another good example, meaning, so we know we have to invest in information systems and technology. We can't lay these people off when we start doing bad. In fact, what we should be doing is the exact opposite. We should be looking at these people going, all right, guys, our business is failing. We're not making any more sales anymore. Our sales, everything's down. Nobody likes our product anymore. Help us. Do something for us. Because that's what these guys do for a living. If you think they're all technology gurus, that's not right. They're sitting around trying to figure out how to make the company more successful using technology and information systems. So they'll probably, hopefully, come back with a good suggestion, like, maybe we should provide this service. Maybe we should automate this process. Maybe we should move our manufacturing to a computer-automated manufacturing facility. Or, I don't know what they're going to come up with. It depends on the type of business. Here's what has happened, however, and the focus of this particular case study from GE was, now companies just say, okay, we understand we need to spend money on technology. So then they go out and they overspend, they buy everything. Oh look, we have wireless networks. Oh, let's put one in. Well, we already have a wired network. What do we need a wireless one for? Oh look, we got 3G. Let's upgrade. It's kind of like how companies get consumers to upgrade. They say, now you need Uverse. Now, I don't even know what Uverse is, actually. Why do I need this? I don't have it, actually. I have basic cable. But that's a cable company or service, I guess. Anyway, Comcast, I guess. I don't know. Long story short, those companies that hire managers who aren't IS savvy, who don't know any better, rely upon consultants who show up, kind of like door-to-door salespeople, and they sell them a bunch of stuff. In fact, for a while, IT consulting was really good. In fact, it still sort of is. IT consultants make a lot of money because they go in convincing everybody that they need to buy this. It's kind of like the curvy vacuum cleaner, the door-to-door vacuum cleaner salespeople. And you may not be familiar with the example. It's kind of an old-fashioned example from the old days. You see it on TV and comedy shows a lot. Long story short, everyone bought a vacuum. High-powered industrial strength vacuum. Whether you really needed it or not, I don't know, because you liked the salesperson. I don't know, they were really friendly. I don't know, so. All right, so yeah, people, it's a common problem of overspending, and then they blame it on the IT. Well, we bought all this stuff, and now it's sitting over here in the, computer cabinet, and it's not doing anything because we're not using it. I always like the situations in which people go out and they buy a lot of PeopleSoft, SAP software. They put in these extremely complicated analysis programs, and nobody in the company has ever even heard of SAP, or they're not PeopleSoft people. So then what ends up happening is this company actually has to go out and hire new people to come in and train the old people on how to use the PeopleSoft program. And these are very complex utilities. In fact, if you get an opportunity, I think we actually have SAP classes here. Not a bad idea, actually, because nobody knows anything about it. And it's installed everywhere because every company is overspent on it. And nobody uses it. It gets totally underutilized. So they're always trying to figure out, well, we have this. Why don't we make some use out of it? It's kind of like what you do when you say, well, I bought this computer and it has a video screen, it has a camera and a microphone, and it has all this stuff on it, but I've never used any of it. Maybe I should make a YouTube video or something. I don't know. Sometimes people and companies think the same that way. Who knows? Another example is Dell Computer. Michael Dell, who used to be, probably still is, CEO of Dell Computers. Anyway, anything in business can be either a sinkhole or a competitive advantage from his perspective. And these are quotes. These are things on these slides that, as I go through, I forgot to mention, are things that these people have said that have some significance because they have a really good meaning associated with, whatever they said was actually turned out to be true. And they may not have said this recently. It may have been mentioned a long time ago. But in terms of a competitive advantage, if you do it really, really bad, or if you do it really, really well, it could be a sinkhole or it could be a competitive advantage. A classic example of that is when you start putting in automation. In fact, a lot of companies love to put in brand new programs and procedures. Monday morning, the customer service people come in, they turn their computers on, and they go, "What? What is this? You've swapped out my program. I have a new login. I have everything's upgraded, but they don't know how to use it." So the company spent a lot of money on something and they failed to train the people. They failed to even get the end user's perspective on it. Like, do we actually even need this? Because maybe they automated something that didn't really need to be automated, and there was something else that they probably could have automated instead that would have been a better benefit. You see that when you see multiple programs of the same type. Like you walk in and you see you're cutting edge, I should say. Now, if you don't do it, you're behind the times. It's almost automatically assumed if you're going to run a business in the U.S. that you're going to use technology to help that business. If you don't, you're not going to be able to run the business. So they kind of the old traditional mom and pop shop, like opening up the little for sale sign, throwing the blanket out on the ground with your products out there. And you still see them, when you go to shows, trade shows, or you go to fairs, like downtown festivals and things. You see like the jewelry and the handcrafts and stuff. But, really, does someone really make I guess people do really make their living that way. But if you're going to try and make a lot of money and actually try to support a family on it, that doesn't work. So neither does opening up a store and relying upon walk-in sales. That doesn't work either. So nowadays, in order to even, make the cost of living here in the United States, it's going to definitely be a challenge. So anyway, what ends up happening to most businesses is they have to actually kind of think outside the box a little bit and start, understanding how to use technology to make that business successful, to give yourself the best chances of success. So we'll also look at several strategies using internet technologies. When I talk about IT, for most businesses, the internet is the main component. In fact, for most everything we're doing these days, the internet plays a huge part. So we have to basically know how to use it and take advantage of what it has to offer and give you some advantages and maybe also some disadvantages. So, take a look at a lot of different types of things and also look at some examples of how businesses have been able to re-engineer themselves. Take a look at how the business tasks can be improved. And this is kind of builds on, if you've taken my MIS course, Management Information Systems, then talk a lot about business processes, business process re-engineering, and using information systems to kind of help support the work effort. In this particular class, we're going to focus more on the technology aspect of it. But it is a huge part of doing business. I mean, people go to work every day. They have jobs that they're doing. They have work assigned to them, tasks that they're performing. You have to use technology these days. If you rely on old manual labor, again, it's just kind of like throwing out a blanket and putting some jewelry on it. You're not going to be able to compete, especially with people on eBay who are selling them, every second. They got 10 sales coming through. So anyway, re-engineering is another topic, identifying the value, the business value of using the internet and internet technologies as well. And then also looking at identifying how to become agile in terms of an agile competitor, and how to form a virtual company, and how to use technology to give you a company image. In fact, that brings up a really good point. Talking about throwing out a blanket and putting some jewelry on it. That was done maybe 10, 20, 30 years ago. Still being done today. But now people just, purchase some web space for $9.95 a year, throw up a website. There you go, you're in business. It's kind of the equivalent, but it's kind of also, shows you a sign of the times. With technology, we're doing the same thing. It's the same concept. So business is business. And then, as technology grows, it's like you have to adapt. Otherwise, you can't. You can't survive. In fact, in the old days, if you had a website, when the internet was first kind of becoming well used and kind of the public focus, people thought you didn't exist. Oh, you're on the internet? Oh, and that's not real. That's a hoax. That those guys are, they're fake. Now it's the opposite. Now, if you're not on the internet and they can't find you on the internet, that's a hoax. You guys you don't exist. Even if you've been in a building for 20 years and you don't have a website, you missed the boat. Actually, is what happened to you. You're off the wagon, I guess. I don't know. All right, also explaining how knowledge management systems can help businesses gain strategic advantages as well. And if you were in my MIS class, I talked a lot about knowledge management, knowledge engineering. This is kind of an extension of that and how to use technology to develop knowledge and actually to grow the information concept. Because we know information is information that's built from data plus data. And data plus more data gives us information. Information plus more information gives us knowledge. Knowledge plus more knowledge gives us wisdom. I don't think we can get any higher than wisdom. I don't know. I haven't gotten any higher than wisdom myself, so I don't know. All right, so why study strategic IT? The question of today, which is really kind of the lecture one material, essentially, that I gave you last week. So just to review, technology is no longer an afterthought in forming a business strategy. It's actually the cause and the driver of the business. If you think about so many businesses that have come into existence, and it's probably not a bad idea to start talking about what the difference is between a business and what's referred to as an e-business. Because you've got a few choices when you open a business. For the entrepreneurial people, you can open up, a traditional style business. Or you can go the e-business route, which is actually kind of different. That goes back to what I said about management philosophy of work and delegating tasks and standardizing work. If you actually use information systems and technology to make people conform to a certain work process, they can't do it any other way. In order to complete the sales order, they have to get the correct address. They have to get all of the necessary information. Otherwise, it won't print. Or otherwise, the sale won't go through, or something like that. And you can't take a credit card number without the 3-digit code on the back of the card or something like that. Or, all the pieces are there. And here's another guy from the first case study. And this case study actually comes out of the book that I mentioned on slide number 2, if you're interested in looking that up. Because sometimes it actually is helpful to actually read what the case. I'm not going to go through. It would take me an hour just to summarize this case. But it goes through a bunch of different scenarios in terms of comparing, is everybody inconsistent? All these CIOs and CEOs, are they consistent with what their views are in terms of it? Does it matter? Or can we do without information systems? And so commercial transactions processing in the United States, some part of Europe reaches, what does that say? Maturation? It becomes mature, but that's only one segment of IT. And which is kind of a good point in terms of what this guy was thinking of, in terms of if you just think about information technology or systems in terms of e-commerce or transaction processing, great. And it's really mature. In fact, I think we've done a really good job, personally, I can say. I think from what I've seen out there, we've got that down pretty good. We got shopping carts, we got credit card processing, we got everything going well. But that's only one part of it. You can't stop at that point. It doesn't make any sense. This is another route, going back to disadvantages. This is another route that a lot of companies make, is they take something that's already working well, and they try to improve it even more. And I'm thinking, why? If it's not broken, don't fix it. Which kind of applies to information technology as well. Fix something that's broken. Why do we have a new version of everything every year when we don't need it, kind of thing? So it gets to a certain point where upgrading doesn't even make any sense, even for a personal computer user. If you have an operating system like XP, I never upgraded to Vista. It worked just fine for me. It's still working I'm still using the same XP system that I used before Vista came out. Why do I need to upgrade to Vista? I don't know. I might actually eventually upgrade to 7 because it's compatible with XP. But if it's not broken, don't fix it, is my point. In fact, I hated it for a while. You couldn't buy a computer that didn't have Vista on it. Now I'm kind of glad that's gone. But companies do the same thing. They got this version, and then they put in a version that's worse than the previous one. It's like, what? That was a nice investment in information technology. Okay, good spending. Okay, so a bunch of networks, bunch of computers, or hardware plus software that mediates and manages human knowledge of information. Well, this point that the guy's trying to make is kind of going along the lines of, do you put in a bunch of stuff, or do you put in something that actually is going to be collecting data, managing it, creating knowledge, actually working as an information system? And that goes back to, what is really an information system? There's a ton of applications out there, and a company can actually invest in tons of these applications and programs and things, but are they really implementing an information system? Depends on what they're using the application for, and it depends on whether or not they're actually collecting the right data and managing the right data correctly and actually producing the correct information. I mean, you can keep track, and this is the interesting thing is, everybody kept asking for zip codes. It was just kind of funny, because this kind of goes back to, and I always think of the example of Starbucks. Why would a company ask for a zip code when you're making a sale? You take the effort, and it costs like a second or 30 seconds or maybe a minute for some people who get distracted to collect this information. When you're talking about dollars and cents, the person's not processing as many people through the line as quickly if they have to stop and ask a question, what zip code are you from? And then take the time to enter it in. If you're going to ask for it, use it. Which is kind of interesting because a lot of companies, everyone's asking for zip code. Oh, what's your zip code? And a lot of people just, either the information was captured into the register, it wasn't even recorded. I don't know what they were doing with it. Writing it down on the list. Long story short, you would do that if you, let's say, wanted to strategize a new location. Let's say you wanted to open up another Target store or something. Then you'd find out, well, where are you coming from? And find out, they're all coming from there. That's like 20 miles away. Okay, so we need to open up a store over there. Or like in the Starbucks case, we're trying to figure out what store to close because we got too many locations. We'll see if you're coming, you'll travel a little bit longer to come to this store versus that store. But there's a lot of companies that take a lot of information, and I really personally didn't enjoy having to give out my Social Security number. You guys don't have to do that anymore because the American population has trained most businesses that it's not socially acceptable to ask for a Social Security. That the guy's trying to make in terms of what this guy was thinking of, in terms of if you just think about, well, we have 5 programs that do the same thing. Some people use that one, some people use that one, not everybody uses the same program, not all the salespeople are processing the orders the same way. And this one poor soul, she's got 5 screens in front of her, and she's typing in this one, printing out from this one, and doing this one, and you look at that and go, whoa, it's like a lot of spending, and it actually made her slower than if you just took all that stuff out. But if you put it in correctly, it would have made her faster. So essentially that's what he's getting at in terms of it could be a sinkhole or a competitive advantage. In fact, it's usually one way or the other, if you haven't noticed. There are hardly very many investments in IT that don't show any effect at all, if you're actually using it. So if you're using it and it's good to have this, why don't we make some use out of it? It's kind of like what you do when you say, well, I bought this computer and it has a video screen, it has a camera and a microphone, and it has all this stuff on it, but I've never used any of it. Maybe I should make a YouTube video or something. I don't know. Sometimes people and companies think the same that way. Who knows? Another example is that Dell Computer. Michael Dell, who used to be, probably still is, CEO of Dell Computers. Anyway, anything in business can be either a sinkhole or a competitive advantage from his perspective. And these are quotes. These are things on these slides that, as I go through, I forgot to mention, are things that these people have said that have some significance because they have a really good meaning associated with, you know, whatever they said was actually turned out to be true. And they may not have said this recently. It may have been mentioned a long time ago. But in terms of a competitive advantage, if you do it really, really bad, or if you do it really, really well, you know, it could be a sinkhole or it could be a competitive advantage. A classic example of that is when you start putting in automation. In fact, a lot of companies love to put in brand new programs and procedures. Monday morning, the customer service people come in, they turn their computers on, and they go, what? What is this? You've swapped out my program. I have a new login. I have everything's upgraded, but they don't know how to use it. So the company spent a lot of money on something and they failed to train the people. They failed to even get the end user's perspective on it. Like, do we actually even need this? Because maybe they automated something that didn't really need to be automated, and there was something else that they probably could have automated instead that would have been a better benefit. You see that when you see multiple programs of the same type. Like you walk in and you see, well, we have 5 programs that do the same thing.
The view, as per the view of the CEO of the Dell Computers, it means that, the employees working in the organization, they are at times not sure what is going on around them. Some automation comes into the system, or some changes has been made into the system, and finally when they comes up and open the system, if you have remember that I have explained you the client server architecture. So if you make any changes to the server side, automatically all the changes will be seen on the client side also. So when you find, as per the requirement of the business, suppose if some change has been made on the server system, and when you come in the morning and open the system, you find all those changes being present on the client system as well. So it basically means to say that there are a lot of things going on in the company which is at times seems to be competitive for you, at times it becomes a sinkhole for you. If you understand the process, if you understand why the changes have been made, then it seems to be a competitive edge for you. If you don't find this competitive edge, it will seem that if you don't understand what change has been made, then it will be a sinkhole for you. And a lot of people in the organization at times, they are not sure what is going on around them. You will find a lot of people going to the organization, is drinking a cup of tea and cup of coffee, doing little bit work, exchanging some bills, and they are coming back home. Some people, they are very much technically sound. Some people are mediocre. So at times you will find that there are a lot of people who are not exactly sure that what they are doing, because technologies keeps on changing very fast. Business requirements keeps on coming. Some new requirements are coming. So you have to keep yourself updated with that. If you are not updated, you are out of the race. So at times it seems very confusing. So this is what is the view of the Michael Dell, the CEO of the Dell Computers. Okay. Is it clear to you, Prabhu? Okay.
It's just it actually doesn't exist. But we have, accounting people know this for sure. You have this when you're trying to sell the company, right? Well, now information and knowledge has a value to it. And that becomes part of the sale. So you might not necessarily have good faith, but maybe you have a huge database of knowledge. Maybe you have the know-how. And a classic example of that is Apple. So Apple would have good faith, would have customer base, would have people, but they also have some extremely nice industrial design and engineering.
Okay, then we'll be stopping here then, if you have another class, and we'll be continuing from this point into the next class. Okay, so thank you all for your time. Just do give your feedback after the class, and we'll be continuing from this point in the next class. Okay, thank you all. भैया भैया मेरा बेटा वो बात हो गई इनसे किसी जगह से।